Hello everyone, Dr. Christine Smith back for a really interesting live today with someone that I've been following for a long time, and I think his work is fascinating. Some of you may have heard of Garry Lineham with The Human Garage. He has a whole channel and it's all about understanding how your fascia plays a role in how you store and hold emotions and trauma in the tissues. So they often say like the issues are in the tissues, right? And we forget that our body is this storage system for all of these different experiences. And in this, like he has ended up developing something called fascial maneuvers, and there are all these different ways of working with the body and working with our different fascial integration points and connective tissue systems and the way that they interact with our muscles and our joints and the rest of our tissues and our, again, our detox pathways, our ability to move lymph. And I'm just working on getting him on here, sending an invite. Always gotta love technology. But in this, I think it's just one of these amazing pieces of the body that has been forgotten about. And if we can remember these details, remember these facts about it, it can really change our way of being able to interact with our body and listen to it and understand what it's asking for, and working on all these different components. And so now that we're here, hello, Gary, good to see you.
Hey, Christine, how are you doing? Good to
I'm
see you
good.
again.
Thank you. Yes, you too. I was just telling everybody a little bit about you and just kind of explaining a little bit about the role of fascia in our lives and all the different components of our health, because I think people, it's often forgotten about. Like in the cadaver lab in school, they used to like throw it in the trash can, right? And now we're understanding it almost as this different kind of part of our sensory system. So I would love if you could tell everyone a little bit about yourself and how you ended up developing this whole technique and just what you've seen come of all
Well,
this.
I think as we have our audience coming in, Dr. Christine Smith, I think it's important for our audience to know who you is too, because we have two people, and they're coming in right now. And can you just give a little bit of background?
Yeah, so one of the reasons that I ended up meeting Gary at a conference, and I recognized him because I'd been listening to his stuff for years because I find it fascinating. And I'm a holistic wellness practitioner. My background is cognitive neuroscience. My doctorate is in chiropractic, and then I've done a ton of continuing education in functional medicine and worked in the research realm and worked with how trauma affects the body. And I do everything from body work to functional medicine to subconscious techniques, everything ranging from like neurolinguistic programming to rapid rewire method to Psych K. And all of these help me work with the body in a holistic way because nothing is separate. And I
Exactly.
can work on yeah, I can work on the physical body, but literally you can have emotional blockages that are preventing something from healing. Or we can clear all the emotions and we can work with the physical body. But if your chemistry is all messed up, that's also not going to work. But I will say, first and foremost, the thing I have found in care is like, if I had to pick the most important of all of them, it's the emotional side, which is why I'm so fascinated in your work, because it's a physical way to release a lot of those blockages that we store.
We say fascinated.
I like that.
Christine, I forget, when is your birthday?
Mine, September 17th.
Whoop, cut out there for a second. Was that me? Sorry, you cut out for a second. What was it?
September 17th.
Oh, wow, master level Virgo. Okay, got it. So, yeah, and you might even be a Grandmaster Virgo. I got to run your chart sometime, which is the healer,
I
embodiment healer. Always, really, really smart. Always figuring stuff out, looking for all of the answers. And if you're 25 degree, it means you'd be doing it in a spiritual way. So you're looking to help people, irrespective of what. In other words, you don't necessarily identify with all of the man-made preconditions. You are continuing to look for answers.
I definitely tend to go against the status quo.
Well, okay, so let's talk about status quo. We talked about cadaver labs. So if I was to take a river and I show you a riverbed and it's all dried up, that would show you the direction that the river flowed, but it would give you no context on how deep that river was. It wouldn't tell you how much water was in it. It could have been like 40 feet, 60 feet. It could have been 3 inches. And when we look at a human body in a cadaver lab, which I've done, it doesn't tell you the flow of the fascia properly. It just gives you a pathway. And we live in a quantum world, and I know you believe that. So
Yep.
in a quantum world, what I have found in developing this technique is that the way that I view the body, so my intention going into the experience changes the way that the human body responds to the experience, which was why in my practice I had in Venice, California, I had 52 practitioners from every discipline. We had 10,000 active patients at a time. On hour and a half to 2 hour appointments, we ran 5,000 plus appointments a month. And it was a massive lab, and I had every modality from psychiatry to functional medicine to Chinese medicine to a rabbi who would blow smoke on people. So we put it
You
all
need
together
different
because
things at different times.
yeah, I mean, well, because what we had is we have the most elite clients in the world. Everybody from Ben Affleck to the U.S. Olympic team to professional athletes to the spiritual leaders, Nita Mojani and stuff like that. Like we had everybody collaborating there, and it was an interesting experience. What we did was I was looking to solve my own issue of 30 years of pain. 20 years into that issue of $2.5 million and hiring practitioners all over the world, I decided to become a practitioner. And I didn't go to school, I just became one. And what I did was I hired the best in the world and I worked alongside them and I apprenticed. And I'm autodidactic, so I learned very fast. And what I did was I found a pattern in medicine and healthcare. And I utilized that pattern to understand more. And as we brought the modalities in, we did things in our clinic, which caused some problems with the government. Like the FDA didn't like the fact that we didn't diagnose. Medical board, I mean. We took privacy out. So we removed all the walls in the clinics and we put the clinic in a house. So it was a big $10 million house and it was like open floor, open concept. And what we found is that the power in community was healing people. And when we took away the shame of diagnosis, people started to actually heal because they weren't afraid to talk about it. One of the biggest thing is that it's a whisper. It's like, I have AIDS. And I'm like, that shouldn't be something we're whispering about because that shame is what was not allowing the body to process. So when we look at fascia, I went down the traditional route. I practiced, if you were in chiropractic, if you look at it, it would be more diversified and a little bit of a mashup of Nuka. But again, I had developed this way of working with fascia, and I started bringing the disciplines around to support it. So people would come in for a set about 16 sessions with a motion mechanic. The motion mechanic would move their body in these contorted fascial movements. And then we would support it with chiropractic, with Chinese medicine, with acupuncture, reflexology, a special type of massage, nutritional support, and all that is a full team. So you had a team of 4 to 5 people working on you all the time in the clinic. And you had a team of about 15 or 16 practitioners that were supporting you through a 3-month journey. That was the Human Garage Clinic. Here's what I found out.
That's amazing.
Here's what I found out at the end. When I left my own care, I was in pain again. And so the care hadn't resolved my issue. The care had been a bigger, better Band-Aid that when I realized it, I thought, I'm good. I'm feeling good. First time in my life, 30 years, I'm feeling good. I've got this. And then the pandemic came and I'm in pain again and I can't see anybody. So we had been developing these fascial movements that we would train the players on or the coaches and the trainers for the players so that when they were not able to get, like we worked with the Dodgers as an example. So when they weren't able to get their players to us for this specialized care, we would give them things that they could do. And so these movements were basically things that we were doing on a table. And we said, well, how do we do it off the table? And how do we show somebody else who doesn't know what we do how to do it? And then during the pandemic, my partners at the time, Cynthia and Jason, what we did is we worked together and And we said, well, how do I do that on the table? How do I do it to myself? How do I do it to you? And then how do I do it to myself? And we were moving therapy off of a table. And it was based around this belief system of how the body worked. Like for one of the things that the premises of the work was simple, is that system in the human body. We have 14.7 pounds of pressure per square inch on the body. That means that with 14.7 pounds per square inch, there's about 2,000 pounds of aggregate pressure on us. That means we have 2,000 pounds of aggregate pressure pushing out in what they call a viral. Oh, that's funny. In what we call a
I didn't even know it could do that.
biotensegrous in biotensegrous environment. It's like a balloon. So if we eat something it doesn't agree with us, we pressure up. Well, that pressure is innate and runs, and we saw it as running the systems of the body, because if we get too much pressure or inflammation, systems in the body would stop to work. So we were looking at, well, when I take a movement and then I move down like this, it compresses the body. And if the body's counter rotated, it forces the fascia to go like this and twist. And you probably have gone through that whole talk of piezoelectric, like when you compress and turn. Yeah, so it creates a piezoelectric effect in the body, in the fascia of the body. And it uses the body's internal compression as we squat down to force the fascial layers to go like this and open up. And then hyaluronic acid and all that stuff start to populate in those layers that previously weren't there. That's why when we do this work, that's why when people do a facelift, they look younger, because they're actually filling up the layers of fascia. So it was a journey trying to solve my own issues, working as a practitioner, becoming very good at what we did, and then being in pain again for the first time in 35 years. And then what we did is when we figured out how easy it was to solve it, 3 months, by the way, my 35-year issue was done in 3 months by doing these movements. And when we discovered that, we're like, we have to share this with the world. And I was angry because I'd spent $17.5 million. So I'm like, we're sharing it with the world free of charge. We'll find a way to do it. And we took all of our capital, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we put it into creating content during the pandemic. And our whole thing was, if we ran out of money, the content would be up there for life and people could use it. And that's what happened. And as a matter of fact, we actually got down to the fact that we ran out of money. And then we started receiving donations from people. And they weren't, we weren't asking for it, like literally unsolicited donations. And then that's what spun this worldwide movement. And to put perspective around it, we have about 4.5 million people in education platforms or on media, but we have 1 million practitioners around the world prescribing these movements daily. And we have about 40 million people today doing these every day, and it's growing by about 1.5 million a month.
That is such an amazing story. And thank you for sharing that. And thank you for starting an awesome clinic. And then also thank you for realizing that people need to be taught how to save themselves. And like, that is why I do this channel. That is why I work the way that I do, is I'm so much more oriented towards teaching clients how their bodies work, so that you can logically think through things and critically think about different decisions that you make, rather than only being told what to do. I think people forget that, like, the base root for doctor even means teacher. But I'm actually really glad that you went your own path. And there are times where I wish I had done the same thing, because you end up with a lot of walls based on your degree. And it's a very interesting thing that you don't realize until you get there. And you have a lot of freedom when you're able to just study with different masters and not have it locked into a specific paradigm. So I actually think some of the greatest masters come from that path. And a lot of the study that I've done was not in school. I'd say school is a foundation, it's a skeleton for like understanding basic physiology. But if you truly want to be a good practitioner, you have to go study with people who are getting the results that you're looking for. And it's often some kind of obscure technique. The technique that got me into body work was kind of an unknown technique called associative awareness technique for rebooting the nervous system after trauma. And it's not that well known, but it works really well. And so I have amalgamated, like you, many things into my practice. And with this, then as you learn all these different mechanisms, and you learn it outside of a protocol structure, your brain understands it differently. And you start to get a lot more creative in your work because you actually understand how the body works and you can logically think through why something would be different in one case versus another case. And if we can start to teach people over treating them, I think this is the future of health, right? It's giving people their power back. It's helping them to be able to make their own decisions. It's helping them to self-maintain. And like, you know, as a practitioner, if you're really highly invested in the client, your goal should be to not see them. And that's like an interesting outcome, but it's true. But what you're doing is you're creating community and you're giving people a place to hang out where they're not just coming to be treated, they're coming to be healthy. And having that kind of community, as you said, is healing in itself. It's why I really love doing group programs and things like that. But then figuring out how to manage it all, that is when you start teaching other practitioners and you start spreading this knowledge, and then they can teach other people. And so it's like you don't even have to be in the field of practicing. You can still learn this knowledge and direct other people to the right things, because this is, I think, why you and I both do this, is just to get the word out there and let people know that these things exist. And in this worldwide movement, then we can teach people things like the piezoelectric effect, which is awesome. For anyone who doesn't know that, it's a really cool thing that your body does for like knowing how to grow tissue. So like when you put weight on a bone, it creates like an electrical charge which draws calcium ions to that component of the bone, so it strengthens. And in like Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, when you're creating pressure through breath work, you're actually creating a piezoelectric effect in the pineal gland, and you're starting to change your neurotransmitters and their metabolites. So it's really, I like it. That's why I love your name too, Human Garage, right? It's really understanding the body like this beautiful, sacred, frequency, quantum-based machine that it is. And it's like a blend of all of them. So anyway, I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts related to
So
that. And then I can,
yeah,
yeah.
I mean a lot of stuff. And when I met you and I talked to you and I looked at your stuff, I know that you practice outside the box. I have a lot of space for anybody practicing outside the box because that's what I do. When it comes to saying what we know about the body, since I came from systems, like I built companies and systems, like tens of thousands of employees, data systems. I look at systems and computers and programming, and I see the body as a fluid adaptive biological computing system, and I know you do as well. The but one of the things that astounded me is we use these terms like idiopathic. It means that we don't know, you know, and we have a very reductive way of looking at the body, meaning that it's if we don't know what it does, we don't need it. And one of the things that when I came into healthcare, there's a couple of things that I questioned right away. I'll tell you one of them. So everything that happens in your body, everything from a hormone production to blinking your eyes to moving a muscle to a thought, requires proteins in the cell, not protein we eat, but proteins in the cell to activate. And these proteins, each cell has between like 5,000 and 20,000 proteins. And and if we just, for this example, let's say that each cell had 10,000 proteins. We have 50 trillion cells. We have 10,000 proteins, 5 quintillion proteins. And there's not a function in the human body that exists or does without the activation of these proteins. If we were to scientifically step back, and if I was to say, you know, if I was an alien and kid said, okay, how much of the primary function of the human body is proteins, how much of these proteins do you humans know? They should know what, about 80% to be scientifically say we know, or maybe 2/3. Out of 5 quintillion, we identified 100,000, and we know what 5,000 basically do. So we know 5,000 out of 5 quintillion, and this is where I came from. I didn't come in through the religion of medicine. I came in through the analytics of it, and I said, we actually don't know anything about the human body. That means that everything that we're saying is religious. And it's not that it's not true, it's only true within the scope of that belief system. And again, that was my way of looking at it, because I went my path. I was in so much pain for so many years, 6 to 9 pain for a decade, and 4 to 6 pain for a decade before that. I explored everything, including, mental practices, religious practices. I went anywhere. I went anywhere. I spent $2.5 million trying to resolve what I thought pain was. And what I've learned now is that pain is just my body's way of saying, I need you to listen to me. And I do a demonstration where I create pain in somebody to a level 9, and then I make their body take it away in real time. And I do this in front of thousands of people so that they can see that actually pain is just your body, your computer saying, attention over here. And when you listen to it, the pain signal drops. And one of the other ways to look at it is, if you have a 2 pain or 3 pain and you put adrenaline in the blood, so you get stressed out, that 2 or 3 becomes a 6 or a 9 instantaneously, which means pain is relative to our experience. And we have all these things that were supposed to be hardwired about the body that I just didn't find to be. And part of it was dissecting and tearing apart the pieces. And again, not as a doctor, but as a scientist, N of one, I started ripping apart the pieces and saying that doesn't make sense. And what I believe we found, is a programming language. And not to say that any of the other programming languages are right or wrong. The one that we use has something that happens, which is a very quick result. Like what I do live all the time, or not all the time, I've done this several times, is I record these sessions so that nobody can disagree with a session. Like you can, like in a continuous role, like I'll reverse a 27-degree scoliosis in 1 hour. Now, and I've done this multiple times, and I post the entire thing so that nobody can disagree with it. Now, what we can disagree with why it happened, but we can't disagree with it did happen. Like, I'll give you another one. We have tens of thousands of women right now between 55 and 67 coming out of menopause, and they're reporting it with medical evidence. And as a matter of fact, the 65-year-old is ready to get pregnant. And again, this beats the traditional belief systems that we have of who is a human and what are we. And I felt that because I couldn't, in the current model of science, there wasn't enough time for me to get enough science to prove it. So we released it to the public and we said, show us what you got. Now we get 10,000 testimonials a month, and including kids coming off the spectrum, people reversing diseases of their own, like cancer, people with autoimmune conditions completely resolved. And again, these aren't our claims. These are from people that report the evidence to us, which gives us the ability to repost their findings. And this is where I'm at the point where I want people to measure results rather than facts or belief systems. And what we have is something that's simple and it's easy. And here's the best part about Christine is that everybody can go right now and do a 15-minute stress reset, and they can lower their stress by 75 to 90% in their body. And they can do it anytime, as many times as they want. And everything from there to a practitioner is free of charge. And that's really what is driving this worldwide movement right now.
All I can think about is something that I say to my clients often that you're doing, and it's learning to speak the language of the body.
Yeah.
And this is essentially what I just want people to learn, is how to do this. And there are so many different ways of doing it. And then when you compare, like, we know like a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent of the proteins in the body and their role. And we think we understand so much, but we understand so little. Our brain is a quantum computer. It works in 11 dimensions. We are still coming to understand it. And then there's like protein quantum tunneling, right? Where it's like, how can something happen instantaneously? And it's basically the understanding that like some of your molecules work at a quantum level and don't really work in the concept of time. So that's like a whole rabbit hole to go down. But in this, lab work is basically us trying to convert the body's language into our language, What you're doing, or what body work is it's converting our language into the body's language. So I do a lot of muscle testing and practice, and that technique that I was talking about, it's like different kinds of tapping and rhythm and like different sensory integration for the body. And I compare it to like doing Morse code for the body, right? Or like when I'm doing muscle testing, it's just a binary system. It's a yes, no operating system. And it's this
Sure.
way that you can like ask the body tons of different questions. So when we start to look at it that way, you understand why you have better results, because it's like if you go to a country where someone doesn't speak your language and you scream at them in your own language, you're probably not going to get what you need. But if you go to their country and you learn their language, you're going to get exactly what you need.
Sure.
So that's kind of what you're doing. And it's a really beautiful thing. And I think it's huge because what I have found in our healthcare system is body work is just like left out. And 4 years ago, when everything shut down, it was considered non-essential. And it's like, I don't really think it's non-essential. I think it's actually one of the most essential things that you can do, because when we come nervous system state, again, like if I'm doing functional medicine, if someone comes in and their trauma is all activated or they've had like an environmental toxin exposure, I'm not starting with nutrients because they can't absorb anything. So we're going
Right.
to start with body work, and we're going to reboot their nervous system so that their cells go from this like contracted cell danger response to actually like being able to release toxins and absorb nutrients again. I think people forget that step. And so with all of this and like understanding fascia's role, when we unlock these different pieces that you're talking about, not only can our detox systems work better, but our nutrient delivery systems can work better. It comes like from a similar place embryologically as neurological tissue. I still wonder if it's a component of our nervous system that we don't understand yet because of everything that it holds
Or do
emotionally. And
we
I've seen a bunch
even
of,
have a nervous system?
okay, yeah, like what's your
Yeah,
take
I
on
mean,
that?
I mean, we can jump off a cliff, like isolate it. Tell me if we have a system, you have to be able to tell me the components. Like, do we even have viruses? Isolate it. I mean, we can go very, very deep, but in the context, like if we take some really, really basic practical, like what we did was we had EEGs on the head, we had photonic scanners on the body, and we were measuring the input signal from the foot all the way to the head. And we were saying, how long does it take with nerve conduction testing? How long does it take for that signal to get from the foot into the brain, processed through the homunculus and cerebellum for distance and force and motion, back down to the foot for motor control? And we did this whole pathway, and we did this whole science experiment, and the end result was 1.5 seconds. And I'm like, wait a second here. Wait a second. So how do we move when we step on glass? And they kept saying to me, no, dummy, you're not a scientist. You're not a practitioner. You don't know. And I said, no, 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 no. I pay you. You tell me how we move when we step on glass. So what's a ganglion reflex? And it's like, poof, hit your knee, and you go like that. And I'm like, no, that's not it. Because if I step on glass, I don't go boing. I move intelligently to safety. And it would be 1/1000 on the glass. Ouch, move. So I'm moving intelligently to safety before my brain is even aware that there's a danger. So that means that the body is an intelligent system, and the brain is helping us process that intelligence, which disrupts the brain, and the muscles move the body. So I have a belief system that fascia moves the body. And here's another way to look at it. So I worked with these scientists on prosthetics. And we
Ooh,
have the
cool.
prosthetics now, we can move. Now that thing just doesn't wire into my body. It just sits on my body, and they wrap it up. And I got a prosthetic, and I'm like, so how did if the brain moves the muscles to move the body, how did we move the prosthetic? And they said, oh, silly, that's the brain doing it. I'm like, okay. So the brain, I thought, would work through the nervous system, but there was no connection to the prosthetic. So what moved it? Well, effectively, it's intention. So there's an intention to move the hand. And I'm like, okay, well, how did that intention get delivered? How did the prosthetic know? And this is where science and medicine do not agree, because we know stuff scientifically, we don't know medically. And I'm like, well, okay, so you've got that intention to move. That intention is from your field. So the field is telling the body to move. So what's the role of the brain and the muscles and the bones? It's to meet this is my belief system, and I could be wrong. It's for the brain, the muscle, the body is to meet that intention. And when it meets it properly, we get fluid movement. when we don't meet it properly, it gets jerky movement. And I had these, so I studied and I became a scientist in the body because I was in computers and data. And I kept saying, every time I turn these big rocks over, I get more questions. So I've developed a theory, and I'm completely okay if that theory is bullshit.
That's science.
But
It's exploration.
what it does is it explains how the body works in a way that I can explain the results that we're getting. And I'm open because we're changing it constantly. And this is where I want people that are listening to this to go back to. It's time to relearn our bodies. 85% of care 50 years ago was delivered by moms and grandmothers in the neighborhoods. If we go 100 years ago, it was 98%. Today, 98.5% of care is delivered by an institution or a practitioner. And what we've done is we've divorced ourselves from the responsibility of understanding our own working environment. And if you get a car, but you don't have to put gas in it or clean it or wash it, you don't take care of it the same way. And so we're disconnected between the result and the care and the curative part of our human experience. And like you help patients go through and learn that. This is what our conversations, I'm hoping it's starting to do with people, is saying, I need to be connected back to how this thing worked again. Because I get people, by the way, Christine, I get people in the craziest thing. They'll go, we'll be moving the body, and they'll go, is that safe for me? And I'm like, if you're asking if moving your body is safe, we have a real big problem. But that's where we're at.
It's
Do you want to try
true.
something? I can feel something in you.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So you know how you yes, no test? I know. So I know, people do this and you may yourself, but I can feel that there's something going on in your liver and your gallbladder. You want to try
Probably.
something?
Sure.
Okay. Let's take our right hand, go to your xiphoid, go down to the right underneath, right where the liver and gallbladder on the right side. Just push in there with one hand, with your right hand. Put your left hand on your neck. And imagine that we're sending electricity from the left hand to the right hand. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're going to breathe in through our mouth 3 times together. So breathe in. 2. 3. 4 through the nose. 2. 3. Say, I'm letting go of the anger and resentment that I'm holding in my body.
I'm letting go of the anger and resentment I'm holding in my body.
I'm replacing this with compassion and remembrance.
I'm replacing this with compassion and remembrance.
It's good.
That was very.
Quiet.
Thank you.
Yeah, and since you're Virgo, in the organ reset, the small intestine one is your magic pill.
Can you explain that further?
Sure. Virgo is the brain, embodiment, bringing things in, but the brain isn't really here. The brain is here. So when a baby is being born, there's a ball of plasma that forms when the sperm and egg form, and there's 2 nerve clusters. And until 7 or 8 weeks, there's not a scientist or doctor that can tell you which one of those nerve clusters is the brain and which one's the small intestine. So since you can do surgery on the brain without any anesthesia, it has no pain, no sensors. The brain is just a display screen for the small intestine. So while you're sitting there, you can take your right hand, go to your left hip, pull the skin, stretch it up towards your belly button. Yeah. And then take your left hand, put it on your neck. And then Breathe into your mouth. 2, 3, through the nose. 2, 3. Say, I no longer need to overthink to feel safe in my body or my life.
I no longer need to overthink to feel safe in my body or my life.
I feel safe in my body and my life.
I feel safe in my body and in my life.
Okay, cool. So what do you notice just happened?
I think I'll probably be processing throughout the day because I notice my body speaks subtly, right? I think that's something people forget about the body is like, if you're feeling pain or you're feeling something significant in the body, it is screaming at you with a megaphone. If your body is actually talking at like its normal amount, it's like a deer whispering from the forest. It's like a very subtle kind of quiet thing.
So is your brain
Oh,
quieter?
yes.
Okay, that's what it is. Does the room look brighter or more detailed? May or may not.
Yeah, no, I like it's, yeah, you start to kind of shift out of autopilot and into more perceptual awareness.
So that's your Virgo. And what I did was over 10,000 patients, 200,000 treatments. What we were looking for, when people would come to Human Garage, they would legitimately spend over 12, because a lot of them are coming from other parts of the world, so they have to stay in West LA. And between their stay and their treatment and all that, it could be $200,000 to $300,000. So what would happen is I was looking for ways to predict the behavior of people's bodies so I could help them and in advance. And I applied all these different ways of looking at these measurement systems. And what I found to be most accurate was astrology.
Hmm.
So I applied astrology and without bias. I don't care. I'm not an astrologer. I just applied it and I go, wow, that seems to work. I say cancers always seem to have intestinal issues. Virgos always seem to have small intestinal issues, and there's other parts that go with it. You know, Geminis always have hands and brain and frontal issues, and and I could look at the body shapes. And here's an interesting thing: most of the people that are in the body work field, about 2/3 of them, are either Taurus rising, or Taurus moon, or Taurus Chiron. Out of the thousands that I've met, and so I started to I'm a data guy. I recognize patterns. I see the world through patterns, and I know the astrology of every person that I meet and interact with, and I collect the patterns.
I find this fascinating, and I think, a lot of people might balk at something like astrology, but for me, I'm like, it's thousands of years old, and for us to think that a planet's gravitational pull doesn't affect us in a way that we don't understand, I think would be a little naive of us. And like there's even, like the planets of our solar system are all aligning on like January 25th, and like people just don't pay attention to the cosmos anymore, but those energies, they shift you, they create big changes. And so yeah, you looked like you had something interesting you wanted to comment on that one.
Well, I was just going to say, so yeah, there's a lot of alignment coming up between now and January 19th. People are either spiraling up or spiraling down. But I have become an astrologer because I saw it in the body, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn more. So I do know a lot now. One thing that I want people to think about when you think about astrology, okay, um, patterns for Capricorns: bones and brain, knees, ankles, lower back, and your jaw. So anyways, that somebody asked. Um, if the earth is 70% water, and when the moon goes over, it pulls the oceans into tide. We're 70% water. We should be. We're only 60% right now, but we're 70% water. So that means that when the moon goes over, it's inconceivable that the water in our earth is not pulled with the water in the big earth. And then furthermore, where does the outside of the fascia, Where does the water sit in the bodies of water? Because the fascia, we have water everywhere. That's the fourth phase of water. It's that gelatinous state. But it sits in our bladder and our kidneys. Chinese medicine, kidneys is energy and bladder is fear. And so guess what happens on a full moon? Well, emergency rooms are full with people coming in with a lot of energy around fear. That makes sense to me. I can resonate with that.
There are so many different ways to interpret these things. And this is why I love talking to minds like yourself, because you have taken the time to look at all of the different systems. And like, so one of the neuroemotional or one of the subconscious techniques I practice, neuroemotional technique, is based in Eastern medicine. And it's like you can enter elementally through the body and like understanding the flow of those elements in life and being able to piece these things together. And that's why I also think like in your clinic, it was awesome that you had so many different practitioners coming together, because throughout going through this, I've seen a lot of questions coming in of people asking about, well, where do I find this? Or where do I find this? Or what's the pattern for this? And it's like, eventually throughout your life, you're going to go through a variety of people that foster your growth,
Yeah.
whether that is your personal relationships, your professional relationships, your practitioner relationships, any of those things. But understanding that you might need different participants at different phases in your life for different modalities is a good thing to understand. And I remember I was speaking with a teacher, because we talk in chiropractic, like you can do osseous adjusting, which is like direct bone contact, or you can do tonal adjusting, which is more like energetics and fascia and the biofield. And theoretically, you can use tonal adjusting to adjust either the energetic body or the physical body. But with an osseous mindset, you can only adjust the physical body. You can't adjust the energetic.
Agreed.
So he asked my teacher, well, why would you not just always practice tonal and adjust everything? And he said, because some people can't receive it. They're not there yet. And so as you go through these different phases in your life, your field, your hologram, your body, your mindset, this frequency that is you in our quantum universe is going to become more open to other things that are available as your mindset opens. And then that goes down that whole rabbit hole we were talking earlier of like, well, is it a nervous system, or are we like frequency-based beings? And when you start to think of it that way, then astrology makes a lot more sense, because now we're talking about like gravity and frequency of mass and dark matter concepts, and then that goes down the quantum realm. But it's like you really can't understand these things until you start to study all the different mechanisms, and it's kind of impossible to be an expert in like everything. But if you have a general understanding of it all, I think it evolves the way that you think in whatever field you have found your mastery in. So just like knowing that these other things exist, I think is important.
Let me show you something,
Yeah,
because I'm an investigator,
great.
and and what I have is a big read, because I share my investigation with people. So like we have said millions of people. So I put the call out for people, and I said I show this to genealogists all the time, and I want to show you my twin. Okay, so our eyes are the same, our teeth. It's very, very obvious that we're twins. Our hair, even the coloration on our neck, the teeth, the ear line, it's the same. As a matter of fact, just because, people will question it. So I want to make sure that people can see that there's our feet together. And you can see clearly that we're twins. And I have 41 other ones. And we're twins in, we're not twins in biology. We have different parents. But you know what we're twins in? We're twins in this. This is our astrology, and all of our numbers and our astrological chart are identical. And I found 41 of them, which I don't know why, but 40 of them have been female and only one male. I'm still trying to work the math out on that, but I have been helping other people find their biological doppelgangers, and then to see why they look the same. And so this goes back to, and what I'm doing is I'm providing evidence to crack a mold, because what we have is an astrological blueprint, which is identical. There's only 3 numbers on there that are even remotely off. But all of the numbers out of the 20 states of awareness are the same. But what we do have, so we have that. And the way I see it is we have come with this blueprinted, because when you get a baby who comes out, they're pretty much the same. They're all a little ball of goo. And that ball of goo grows up to be tall, skinny, fat, like chiseled jaw, chubby cheeks. There's something that causes that ball of glue to grow differently or to form the genes and the patterns. And I've also noticed, like with Osgood slaughter or something like that, if you put an unusual force on the body will just adapt and change. So that I would assume that the growth of a human, the shape of a human, is unusual force. And the way I see it is you have an astrological blueprint, you have a DNA that responds to it, and you have an RNA that communicates between them. And furthermore, I believe that the language is emotions. You have 10 organs inside of the fascia and the skin, and those 10 organs all have an emotional set that's specifically attached to it, Chinese medicine. That's why fascial maneuvers, there's 10 fascial maneuvers. There's millions of adaptations, but there's 10 core essential maneuvers, because what I believe we have here is a language. And it's a language that anybody can use and adapt right now today. And the first time that you use it, very first time, your stress goes down 75 to 90%. And you can then adapt that in any way, shape you want. This is what we're bringing to the world. And this is why, honestly, this is why I believe we have over 1 million practitioners prescribing this data today.
No, this is fascinating. Like, thank you so much for coming on to talk about this. And I've seen a variety of questions come in, and so I'm trying to kind of amalgamate them into one. And I am wondering if you could speak to just some of your favorite case studies that come to mind and the transformation that you saw,
Sure.
and like the analysis that you saw, and then the transformation that you saw through some maneuvers, and then maybe adding in along that, like why you think everyone's so sick despite doing the right things.
Hey, let's start off with why everyone's so sick. Okay, so I didn't have much chance to interact with you, but if you touch me, my body composition is very different than the average person. It would be that of a 6-month-old baby. Like, I have no cartilage, I have no rigidity, I don't even have muscles anymore. So I consider myself to be 80+% water. I believe, it's a fact that 75 years ago, we were 80% water. And 30 years ago, when you and I started studying, we were 70% water. Today, it's also a fact that the average person is 65% water, because they're teaching it in med school right now today. And they're teaching it because that's the actual factual truth. They're measuring it and saying that. So what I have noticed is that in the last 75 years, in the last 50 years, and 30 years in particular, we've gone from the 70% to 60% water. Conversely, I've noticed that every disease and dysfunction in the history of mankind has an exactly opposing curve increased. And so I propose that dehydration is the one thing that's common with every disease and ailment. And what I have noticed from studying this for 15 years is that drinking more water is causing more dehydration. And the reason why is because we have unusual circumstances. We have barium, strontium, aluminum in our air. And barium, they are used for geoengineering. And I'm not going to get into the topic of why that is, but we know that they're there. It's present. If you do a hair follicle testing, I used to send to a lab in Texas, every patient, I found that every single person I tested worldwide had barium, strontium, aluminum in their hair at elevated levels. Barium depletes the body's silica. Silica is the base element because we're made of silica, water, bacteria, parasites. So at the core of us, silica is the most basic element. And if silica is not present in proper levels, cal, phos, selenium, everything doesn't absorb. So then we go and take all of our minerals and our vitamins, and they're not absorbing properly. And we're getting more and more dehydrated. And dehydration, when the body's dehydrated, it causes the number one stressor to the body is movement, because if we're dehydrated, movement is a stressor. If we're hydrated, it's an energizer. That's why people feel tired after moving throughout the day. So what we did in the clinic is we gave 10,000 patients 600 milligrams of silica, and guess what happened? Everybody improved from the best in performance to the sickest of them all. And so we made an assumption, and then we practiced it. And now we have literally millions and millions of people doing this. That when we increase silica to 600 milligrams per day, the body starts to hydrate and absorb again. Also, outside of silica, also with like diatomaceous earth, anti-parasitic, cleans out the small intestines, exfoliates, all it balances hormones, all that stuff. That's why they're so sick. And when we talk about case studies, I mean, I think one of the favorite ones that I would go to is we have a parents and children's group. So we have practitioners like yourself, some of the best in the world, and we have parents and we have therapists all meeting together around children. It started off with high needs children. It's like functional, like spectrum, cancer, blastomas, autoimmune disease, cystic fibrosis, stuff like this. And we have the mothers and the fathers, the parents, taking these children off the spectrum. One in particular where we started off was a girl named Luke, who's 13 years old, is non-motion, non-verbal. And she was locked up like this, you know, and after the parents applying the minerals and the anti-inflammatories and just moving the body, at 13 years old, she, for the first time, says, "I love you," to her parents. Now that was pretty cool. But since then, we've had children, Carrie Brown taking her daughter, removing a third tumor they're going to operate on, blastoma. We've got thousands of kids coming off the spectrum right now, like thousands. Like it's at a stage where we just stop taking the testimonials because we have too many. So there's not one case study in particular. You can go in and you can look at a prolapse being fixed in a single hour and explain to Dr. Aegis-Sun. You can take a look at scoliosis, and you can DM us and you can say, "Give me information on scoliosis." We'll send you videos and that where we've reversed 27-degree scoliosis in 1 hour. So we have all of these things that we have done, and people can go and investigate more. But I think when you say the case studies, my favorite ones are the kids, because that's, even in my practice, I didn't do the paid for work. I did all the free work with the kids because that's really where my heart was.
I watched you do a very cool cranial reset on a boy that had gone through C-section and had been experiencing like a bunch of kind of frontal lobe dysfunction. I think people forget, and it's like C-section is now almost pushed these days and like more
38%,
normalized.
but only 8% are medically induced. And the reason why they push them from the 8%, which are medically valid, to 38% right now, almost 40%. The reason why they do that is simply because the placenta is worth $50,000.
Yep. There's a lot of different avenues we could go down with that one, but ultimately I think people forget that going through the birth canal is necessary for your neurological
It
development.
has
Like I
to.
do primitive reflexes. Yeah, I do primitive reflexes in my office, and all doctors learn them. It's a part of our board exam. So like I don't know why more people don't apply this, and like I'll even find primitive reflexes retained in adults
Yeah,
because just like you did in that
for
like
sure.
the boy he was like 8 or something, but like I find it in, especially when people get in like a car accident or something, their primitive reflexes that haven't been integrated will come out. So it's like if we can start to understand the body as like this full genius dynamic network that it is, rather than like a, if you have this symptom, take this. Like it's simple and not simple at the same time. Like it's this beautiful complex thing, but it's simple in the way of like drink water, sleep, breathe, move, and like nourish yourself with basic foods and you'll be okay. And but it is tricky now that we're in an environment that has like so many toxins and
That's
different things. And that's where the
it's it.
biochemical aspect come
Yeah,
in.
it's the environment. Um, I think it's one of the things that I tell people all the time is that the cure is inside of you, and I know you believe that. So that if we replace the proper minerals, if we have 102 minerals in our body with the elements, silica being the dominant, and we move our body, that's movement and minerals is all that we need to do to put the body in a curative state. Because if we could take the body out of stress in like the fascial maneuvers in the 15-minute stress reset, which is on our website, in the first 7 minutes, the biological stress reduction is 75 to 90%. In that particular case, then the person becomes in control of the thing that's dysregulating their hormones or genes and their body's ability to digest, process, and process, which is stress. And and if I now become in control of my own stressor, and the reason why I was at that convention you're at, because it's totally not me. The reason I
Me
was
neither.
there, and the reason I went to that one with RFK, which by the way, Rolling Stone took a real big shot at me for that one, of course. But the reason I went there is because I want the audience who they're getting sicker and sicker right now to see it. Like Christine, from a statistics perspective, 50% of the healthcare workers, including alternative, have left their jobs since 2020. 25 times the amount of people are going into a system that wasn't functioning that's now half as powerful. We currently are answering 1 million health questions a month on our social media platforms with a team of people. And we expect it to be 5 million in 6 months. We have a health crisis that's never, we've gone from 8.3 billion to 7.2 billion since the beginning of 2020. We are, in the way that this is running, if this continues to go this way without intervention soon, that's 3 more billion people that aren't going to be around in 5 years. And this is where what you're doing is so important, because you're not just, and I appreciate you for this, because, and this is why I agreed to come on, because you're not just practicing, you're educating. You are a doctor. And if you're just practicing, with all the respect, if you're not educating, then I no longer give them the moniker of doctor. I don't care what their education is. You're practicing, you're educating, you're helping expand the knowledge of people, helping them believe in their own ability to take care of themselves. And that is where I have all the respect and all the time for it. And that's what you're doing. And I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. And I greatly appreciate you too, because it's funny. It's like sometimes you feel like it doesn't go as far as you want, but then you see other people a few steps farther along the path, and it's very enlivening. So thank you for bringing that vitality to everything that's doing, and bringing vitality back into health, because apparently it just got completely lost in health. And I want to make sure to honor your time, because I could talk to you all day, but as we kind of wrap up with like our last thoughts, I'll just share like a kind of like an interesting tidbit, and then maybe we could kind of end on the front about emotions.
Sure.
And then if we could tell people where to find you or myself if they would have any other questions. But when we talk about the interplay between our environmental and our biochemical and physical medicine and our emotional medicine, I think it's actually bigger than we realize. And like I had this experience when I got mold poisoning, and then it was this fascinating thing where like if I meditated and I regulated my emotions, even though my brain was on fire from mold poisoning, right, my symptoms would come down. And then when I became emotional, they would
Sure.
rage. And it was this fascinating thing where like I lived in the same place, and we cleared everything out. I was getting better, and then another leak happened. We had to like turn on fans and dry stuff, and basically we pissed off whatever mold was still there, and all the symptoms came raging back again. So it was this very interesting experience of like the mold has its own emotions, and we forget that like we are surrounded by this ecosystem that is going through its own experience. And because of my practitioner, my friend and I were talking, we're like, why is everyone being so much more affected by mold now than they used to? It's like, well, one, the toxic burden that we're all dealing with, like, yes, that's a component. But two, she pointed out, and like we were just discussing, like, well, it's an organism too, and it's also dealing with all these environmental changes and toxic burdens and frequency changes that we haven't researched at all as we put up 5G. And it's like these other organisms, these like poisonous organisms that we live with, are going through their own experience in the environment, and then they interplay with us. But it was this fascinating thing to realize just how tied our emotional stuff is to whatever other ailment that we're dealing with. It's basically gas on the fire. And so this is why I kind of want to end with like, well, how do stored trauma and emotions in the fascia play into being able to participate with the rest of our health components?
So I so well put. Emotions are frequency. The body's response to a frequency is resolution. The resolution could come from me exercising, could come from me having sex, it can come from me eating food, but that is that emotions, my body responds, and there's a hormonal balance response, which I have to balance and resonate. So emotions have frequency. And then we respond to that frequency. And depending on where our frequency is when we respond, is the feeling of ease or dis-ease. And I there are the environmental toxins, but we can also firewalk and not burn ourselves. So there has to be a way through this. And it's also true that as the mold becomes more agitated by the system, the collective consciousness of mold is impacting us as well. It's a integrous
A
system
giant
that is all,
mycelium network that we don't understand that feeds
yeah,
entire forests.
yeah. And so what I found is that in my own personal way, the way through it is to mineralize my body and regulate my nervous system through movement. And what people don't really realize, I don't think, is first of all, the origin of all movement is breath. Breath is the first movement, primordial. And second of all, there's only three organs in your body, your heart, stomach, and your bladder, that have a contraction mechanism. All the rest require microcirculation, which is breath in the fascia. So when we're dehydrated and we're not moving properly or breathing properly, we have a dysregulated adaptation cycle to the environment. I'll give you an example. Resting breath rate for me is 3 breaths per minute. The average person in America, 16. Healthy person is 12, 11, maybe 10 if they're a super athlete. So what happens is that there's more capacity in my body to manage the environment. So we are in control of only one thing. We are only in control of how we respond to stimulus. And I can fight it by just working harder, which people tend to do, or I can increase my own body's capacity. Um, we have a supplement guide you can download for free. It talks about not just what to take, it says why to take it and how to not get it from us too. It's not about us. It's about, because we're in 80 countries, so most of the places they can't get our supplements anyways. It's why you would take the silica, why you would take like Irish sea moss is one of the mechanisms to get there. And then what to do about it. And what you can control is the amount of minerals that you have in your body, the amount of water that's held, and the movement. And when we do that consistently over time, the body goes from this feeling of not at ease, like fear, anxiety, that doesn't make me feel at ease. If I leave it there, it's measurable at some point. And it allows me to move from dis-ease to ease in a very, very simple, easy way. It's control our response. And our response is based upon our environment. And we can't control the outside environment, but we can control us.
I think that was beautifully put. And that was essentially the realization that I came to in my own experience too, is it's like the only thing that you can control is your reaction.
Yep.
That's it. That's the only thing that you have control over. And if you can start to learn how to do that, you can start to enjoy your life so much more.
Take the
And
stress out.
it's, yeah, and you just realize that it's this beautiful journey. So thank you for that amazing description. And man, we could do a whole nother talk on this. So if you guys are interested and you want to hear us talk about anything else, feel free to comment. Go for it.
We can do it again. I'd like you to also, Dr. Stanton Hom, he's a neurocranial specialist out of Orange County. He's been highly involved in our children's program, and you two should talk. I'll put you together.
Okay.
I have him on WhatsApp though. Do you have WhatsApp?
I do.
Okay. So I'll put you together. He has implemented fascial maneuvers in his practice because he saw the results coming from the parents. But you two talk the same language, and I really feel that somehow, somewhere, there's some magic in between there. And then we'll have a chance to talk again and meet in person, because what I'd like you to do is experience it, and you can experience the fascial nerves yourself. You're in Denver, right?
Yep.
Oh yeah. And there's a bunch of people practicing in Denver. It's starting like blowing up all over the world. So
Okay.
is when you experience it yourself, is go out and practice with other people and just see. It's really the experience of these fascial maneuvers.
So I would love that. No, I was already going to reach out to you after this about those kinds of things. And I want to make sure to direct people to the right places for anyone asking. So the doctor he mentioned in Orange County was Dr. Stanton Home. And for anyone who is curious, I am located in Denver, Colorado, but I also work virtually with people. And then Gary, if anyone wanted to work with you or find out more about you, or someone had asked about the guide that you mentioned, where would you direct them?
They can go to our website, humangarage.net. There's very little chance that, I mean, if you have a very rare case, we have a series called Behind the Reel where we work with the most rare cases in the world. But other than that, there's no possibility because we're on a worldwide media tour and we get 20 to 30,000 requests a month. So what we want you to do is to start helping yourself. Don't come to me. I'm not the answer.
Yes. So I guess if people wanted to start learning this technique so that they could do that, it would just be located on
Humangarage.net.
the website.
Yeah, I
Perfect.
mean,
Okay. So
you can go on social media and there's all kinds of things, but their website's a good directory because it'll tell you where to go. There's a lower reset, upper reset, 15-minute reset, really easy, and then a 28-day reset, which is a really good path. Like if someone wants to learn, you could learn enough of how to help yourself in that 20-day reset that it would impact your life for the rest of your life. And again, it's all free.
thank you for doing what you're doing and helping people find resources, because I think that is one of the biggest questions that's always asked is, where do I find this? So thank you for putting your stuff out there. Thanks for taking the time to do this today and sharing your wisdom. I can't wait to talk to you again. And I know you have a busy day, so have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you everyone for joining.
Appreciate
And
you.
this will be posted on my channel, his channel, and also my YouTube at Depth Wellness. So please make sure to follow those and help out small businesses. So thanks so much, Gary.
Bye-bye.
Bye.